Oh, for Thor's sake, said Fishlegs, I'm not having this happening all over again. This was nothing to do with you, Snotlout. You weren't even there. For Thor's sake, it was Hiccup who just saved all our lives, Hiccup who had the clever plan, and Hiccup is the heir to the hairy hooligans. Push him, hey Fishlegs, advised Kamikaze from her mother's shoulder. Fishlegs gave Snotlout a big shove in the stomach. Ordinarily, Fishlegs would never have been able to push Snotlout over, but the shield Snotlout was holding above his head made him a little bit unsteady. He fell overboard into the water with an enormous splash. There was a bit of a horrified silence, and then Chief Stoic the Vast threw back his great hairy head and shouted out, "Ha ha ha ha!" in a great, huge guffaw. The cheers of the watching tribes turned to great yells of laughter, for there is nothing they enjoy more than a really simple joke where someone falls over or gets wet or covered in mud. So they laughed as long and loudly and rudely as only Vikings can, splitting their sides and bending over double and thumping each other on their hairy backs as the sun set on Saturn's Day Saturday in a spectacular display of red and pink and gold. Snotlout was pulled out of the sea by his father, Buckybun the Beerbelly, still clinging onto the shield of Grimbeard the Ghastly, and even Snotlout was forced to join in the laughter so he didn't look like a bad sport. "Hiccup," said Stoic at last, wiping the tears from his eyes. "I have a present for you." Stoic led Hiccup over to the back of the blue whale, and there, being dragged behind by a rope, was the familiar sight of a small, fat boat with a slightly wonky mast and a drunken wobble to the left. "The Hopeful Puffin!" exclaimed Hiccup joyfully. "Gobber dived down into the harbour and brought her up for you," beamed Stoic. "I mended a couple of holes for you," boomed Gobber, slapping Hiccup on the back. "We'll make a Viking of you yet. Maybe you and your dragon Juiceless and Fishlegs and Kamig here could lead us back to Berk in triumphal procession," said Stoic. "After all, it's not every day that the noble tribes of Bogburglar and the Hooligan have their heirs returned to them." As darkness fell all around them, the islands of the archipelago turned from green to grey and then to black, and the Viking warriors lit the flares that hung along the sides of the gently rocking ships. The electric squirms flickered into life and danced across the ocean like little fiery sparks, trailing tails of sparkling, dusty light behind them. The sea was as flat as glass, and the reflection of the full moon in the water made a flickering path of moonbeams, leading all the way up to the distant silhouette of the Isle of Berk on the horizon. Hiccup and Toothless and Fishlegs and Kamikaze climbed on board the Hopeful Puffin, who seemed none the worse for having been down to the bottom of the ocean and come back up again. And if a stranger could have observed that nighttime procession, they would have thought it odd to see the progress of the Viking warships that night. For were not the Vikings supposed to be the masters of the sea, the greatest pirates and navigators the world has ever known? And now here were those two great snaking flaming lines of hooligan and bogburglar ships, zigzagging wildly this way and that, turning round in circles and doubling back on themselves, laughing and apologising and cursing in the darkness. They were all following the lead of one tiny boat at the front, the Hopeful Puffin, as she twirled and span and revolved in her own peculiar way across the path of the moon towards Berk. This is the epilogue, the final part of the story. Epilogue by Hiccup, Horrendous Haddock III, the last of the great Viking heroes. Here I am, back where I started. This all happened such a long time ago. But now I come to think of it, if I look around the desk where I'm writing now, I can see things all around me that remind me of that time. The hook of Alvin the Treacherous hangs on my wall like a golden question mark. By the door rests the shield given to me by the fat consul. I've taken that shield into battle with me all my life, much to the amusement of my friends, for instead of being circular like Viking shield, it is square in the Roman fashion. But then I've always been somewhat of a square peg in a round hole. Even the quill with which I'm writing now is made out of a Roman golden eagle's feather that I found in my cell at Fort Sinister. I look at these things and I remember. And what I remember most clearly is the moment when the balloon rose out of the jabber and hullabaloo of the prison of Fort Sinister and into the clear blue sky like a perfectly round bubble of happiness, or a balloon of thought. I remember the quiet stillness of that moment, floating free of all care and worry, suspended magically in the endless nothingness of the air below and above us. I remember my child self looking down over the rim of the basket and seeing my entire world laid out beneath me like a map in a made-up story. For the first time I saw that the place where I lived and struggled and worried was part of an archipelago of staggering beauty, hundreds of tiny green islands set in a shimmering blue sea. And suddenly I realised with such clearness what pinpricks we were on this ocean universe, what swaggering insects, what posturing amoebas. But size isn't everything, as I'm always telling Snotlout. However small we are, we should always fight for what we believe to be right. And I don't mean fight with the power of our fists or the power of our swords. That has always been the problem with us Vikings. I mean the power of our brains and our thoughts and our dreams. And as small and quiet and unimportant as our fighting may look, perhaps we might all work together like the numberless armies of Zygarastica and break out of the prisons of our own making. Perhaps we might be able to keep this fierce and beautiful world of ours as free for all of us as it seemed to be on that blue afternoon of my childhood. Once my hand held the sword Endeavour so strongly. Now that same hand is as brown and wrinkly as an old salt kipper as it writes these words slowly and shakily across the page. The ink splutters and splodges where once it ran so smoothly. Sometimes I forget what I was doing last Tuesday, let alone 65 years ago. But the winds will still blow when I am no longer here, the storms will still rage, and the forces of empire and oppression, be they Roman or otherwise, will still be waiting at the corners of the ocean. The fight goes on for the heroes of the future. Okay, that's the end. That's a good epilogue. And it says at the end, the sting in the tail. Surely that must be the end of Alvin the Treacherous. Last seen dropping from a height into a heaving mass of sharkworms. And surely there must be a happy ending at last for all our Viking warriors, large and small. But as with many happy endings, there is a sting in the tail. In this case, unknown to everybody, in the confusion when the balloon fell out of the sky, one of our heroes was stung with a single drop of poison from the terrible tail of the venomous Vorpant. And as everybody knows, the sting of the venomous Vorpant is absolutely always fatal. Which of our heroes was unlucky enough to be stung? Look out for the next volume of Hiccup's memoirs, How to Cheat a Dragon's Curse. Okay. That's our second book, isn't it? So we've read Winnie the Pooh and How to Train Your Dragon. So I shall start a new one tomorrow. All right, everybody. See you then. Bye.